So hi everyone, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining Women of MENA in Technology New York City event. We usually, for those of you who know us, we usually have in-person meeting, but because of the corona outbreak, we decided, like any other organization, to go virtual. And this is our third and our first webinar actually since March. So my name is Farisa Mansourian. I'm the New York City team lead, and I'm supported by Anna Modiri Asari, Leila Novini, and Shabnam Habibzadeh, my teammates. And we are super excited for today. We have like amazing speaker, Anna here. And so before handing it over to my teammate to introduce themselves and introducing our speaker, I just want to talk a little bit about our organization. So Women of MENA in Technology, previously known as Persian Women in Tech, we still, like Persian Women in Tech still exists, but it's sub-branded under Women of MENA in Technology. Because on the April 1st, 2020, on our 5th anniversary, we decided to rebrand as a company and organization to Women of MENA in Technology. So we are a nonprofit organization. We founded in Silicon Valley by our founder, Sepide Nasiri. And we provide like different programs, services for our tech community. We are currently in more than, I think, 17 cities around the globe, from Europe, US, and Canada. And we have around like over 20,000 community members, 90% in tech, and like either from computer science to STEM. So I just want to talk a little bit about like Women of MENA in general. And actually we have an amazing announcement today that within like 2 weeks, there's going to be the 3rd annual Women of MENA in Technology conference. It's the next wave of innovators. So it is like every year we have this conference, and this year is virtual because of the corona, and it's going to be on Hopin, and we have an amazing like speakers, panelists, keynote speakers. So if you are interested, please check out our website and womenofmenaintechnology.com. I'm gonna actually type it down in the chat box later. And also because of our generous sponsors, we have like a free scholarship tickets for students. So if you are listening, you're a student and you want to join the conference, please email us at nyc@persianwomenintechnology.com. We're gonna provide you with free access to the conference. And I'm gonna actually write down all the information in the chat box for your reference for the future attendees that come in. And so I think without further ado, I'm gonna ask my teammates to introduce themselves. And also, okay, and the webinar is 1 hour with like 15 minutes Q&A. So if you have any questions, either type it in the chat box or raise your hand. We're gonna let you in to like ask it in person from Anna. But that was all for me. So Leila or Shabnam, you can go ahead, and Anna, you can introduce later. Anna.
Hi everyone, my name is Leila Novini. I handle marketing for our New York chapter of Women of MENA in Technology. For any of our upcoming events, please feel free to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram as Women of MENA in Technology. And I'm just going to put that in the chat for all of you, just for the correct spelling. We also are on Facebook under our main page, Women of MENA in Technology, as well as we have private pages for each city chapter. So if you're based in a different city other than New York, you could join, request to join those groups, or please join the NYC. We have a fun time in the group. And you can also find us on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Shabnam?
That's great. Okay. Yep. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Shabnam Habibzadeh, and I'm part of Women of MENA in Technology New York chapter. And just want to welcome you to our today webinar. If you have any question, just you can communicate with us. We are here, to help you. So you can put it in the chat box. And also, if you have any question for the, our instructor today. So you can again put it there and we will ask your questions at the end of webinar. Also, like at the end of webinar, you can, raise your hand. We can like unmute you and, turn on the camera. You can ask yourself, both way works. So yeah, that's all for me. Anita?
Yeah, thank you, Shabna. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's event. My name is Anita Modiri-Asari. I'm a civil geotechnical engineer based in New York City, and I'm also a part of the Women of MENA in Technology New York chapter. I'm very excited to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Anna Farzinder. Dr. Anna Farzinder is a faculty member of the Department of Computer Science, Whittier School of Engineering at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Her expertise is in artificial intelligence, predictive machine learning, and natural language processing. She received her PhD in computer science from the University of Montreal and her doctorate in automatic summarization of legal documents from Paris Sorbonne University, graduated with highest honors for the top 2%. Recently, she co-authored a book in natural language processing for social media, published by Morgan and Claypool Publishers, and was co-editor and author of a book called Transforming Healthcare with Big Data and AI, Information Age Publishing 2020. Dr. Farzindar won FEMISOR Montreal contest, succeeding with a balanced lifestyle in the innovative technology and art, and her paintings have been published in a book titled 1001 Nights, in which the palette of vivid colors and her unique contemporary style revolved around the place of women in modern society. Her recent artworks are on the topic of art and technology, and you can follow her social media account at afar90210. With that, I would like to welcome Anna John to the stage, and we are very excited to hear your talk, the interesting talk on AI and ethics. Anna John, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation. Could you just give me a sign if you can see me and hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay, sounds good. I would like to welcome everyone, all the participants to this webinar. As you are aware, for today we will talk about the important topic of the ethics of AI, and we want to see if you are the programmer, you are the developer of the algorithm, or if you are from the industry, or you are the user of the technology. No matter what is your role in interaction with the technology, it's very important to be aware of the these ethics and what would be the guideline for further work with AI. Let me share my screen with you. Yes, could you please let me know if you can see my screen as well?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Then, yeah, first of all, the question that we want to ask is as following, will artificial intelligence will take over the world? Is it real? Is it for now? Should we concern about that? Is it something for future, and why we should bother with this type of the question? Is it the kind of the marketing sentence? But really, what is AI? Why should we know about this topic? But if we look at in a more close look, the AI is a part of our everyday lives, is a part of our daily lives. If you start talking with Siri on your phone or other smartphone that you have, all the communication that you do with Siri for asking about the weather, asking about the date, what is in my calendar, all these type of the communication and this question answering, that is AI. Or if you want to just relax and watch a movie on Netflix, the first thing that catch our eyes is the recommendation of the movie by Netflix. Then this recommendation system is the part of their AI engine of the Netflix. And for example, if you just focus on this use of the Netflix, is more than 80% of the movie the user watch comes from the recommendation system of Netflix. And as you can see how this AI system can influence our daily work or in our free time we want to spend for the entertainment. Also, if you, for now, whatever we have as a question, the first thing we Google, then all the system in background of the Google is the AI. Or, simply I want to go today on my Instagram and check what's going on with my friends, with my community, in the art community, what's going on, and all the suggestion, all the posts based on the huge network of the social media, that's an AI engine. Or, that is from the user perspective, but if we are the professional, and we want to work with the more sophisticated methods, lots of the technology that are embedded in the industry, like for example, if you want to do the auto trading stock market, that's another example of AI. Or you apply for a credit card, or you apply for the loan approval, then this decision-making system is another AI. And there are technologies coming, sitting in the self-driving cars or the smart drone for the delivery to your balcony in New York City when you are in the very, very high rise. Then there are the technologies coming up, and this system, they are getting more and more smart every day, every single minutes, because of the data that we are generating, because of the power of computing. And really for today, it's we can't imagine a single day without AI systems. And as you can see here, this question, should we concern about artificial intelligence, it is not for tomorrow or future, it is today. But first of all, what is the formal definition of artificial intelligence? And artificial intelligence, it's with the artificial intelligence, we want to create the human-like intelligence, but not only simulated the human behavior and the way that we can think, we want to go further, and the system should have the capacity of predicting the future. And that is that's the very limited for human. Then the algorithm of the AI, most of them, the machine learning, they can learn from the experience, then the historical data from the 10 years, 20 years or more, the historical data that we have, learn from that, identify the million of the patterns, and also refine this learning by the live information and the new input and adapt it to the new situation. That is basically the way that the AI works, and most of them with the machine learning. But now, this influx of the technology that we have, and the huge consummation of the technology, development of the technology, that's heavy depend on AI, is it a friend or enemy? Now I'm using my phone as my closest friend. Then my phone knows all my appointments, knows all my emails, access to all my photos, the personal photos, my kids, where I'm going. That knows more than the close friends, and it's supposed to subserve me. But there are some convenient and some inconvenient. The pro for that is improve the efficiency, the personal efficiency, the business efficiency, that save time. Just I want to go from this place to that place. I using the map, and it saves lots of time for that. I'm in the better communication. You know, the good example is that today we have a webinar, and it's such a great tool that the way that we can improve our communication and reduce the risk of the cybersecurity or the cyber risk for everything. These are all the advantage of the today's technology, but of course they have some limitation. You know, back to the AI that I have on my phone, that is that they are extremely dependent. See, that creates, you know, I can't live a day without my phone. Maybe a day is a big gap, maybe without an hour without my phone, it's very hard. Technology is expensive. Many of the consumer, they think the technology is for free, but from the development part, from the industry, from the small business, from the corporation, there is a huge cost for that. Then personally, we should pay for the technology, for internet connection, for the phone, etc. But for some systems, like for example, social media, we don't pay it directly with the money, but what we pay is our time and by all the information and the data that we provide to the social media, that we enrich the background of this AI. Another important topic of the problem that we have with the AI is the shortage of jobs. Then just the example of the phone, this phone can cut the many jobs, you know, but I don't need an assistant. I don't need someone to show me the direction. I don't need friends or anyone that everything that can do with a smartphone. Then in the same thing in the industry, that many jobs are disappear by the technology, the translation. Now we have the automatic translation, and it's coming, for example, the driverless car. Then there are lots of the jobs that will cut. The malfunctions of the AI, there are some systems, they have some problems, and what we should do with this malfunction. And also, one of the biggest concern is the misinformation. Today we have access to the information easily. We can go search on Google, we can go on Facebook, we can go on Instagram looking for something, but there are so many information, and how could we know this one is true and which one is a fake news? Then these are the lots of the problem that we have with the current system. But really, how could we know which part of the AI is good and which part it can turn to an enemy for us? Then that is the main concern that we want to talk today as awareness, and see what type of the guideline that is required for that. If we look at the fiction, the science fiction, there are the tons of the story and the book for decades about the intelligent robots, and then how when we simulate the human brain, these robots will take over the world. There are some questions, these are the interesting questions, like, is it true that AI will take over the human race and be a danger to humanity? You know, if you look at the series like Black Mirrors on Netflix, they're talking about this important topic. Or the other fictions, you know, about the million of the people that eventually lose their job because of robots, or the fiction about the, you know, the smartphone. Is it true that they keep our children occupied for hours and hours, and eventually that could replace the parenthood? Because the time that I should spend with my children are not available, they're on phone. And at the same time, when the children, they want to talk with me, you know, I'm on my phone and I'm doing my things. Then that is the one of the important topic that's in the fiction. They talked a lot about that. is it a threat to the humankind, or but another important question, it could be the we talk about AI, but who does control AI and what are their goals? Do we have the clear goals of we know that the company that they keep us busy with Instagram, they keep us busy with entering our data, but is it clear for consumer, even for the developer of the algorithm, is it clear what is their goal? Recently, I wrote a short story. It's a couple of pages. That's it. I wrote the story in Farsi, in Persian. Then, and after that, I used the Google Gboard for the dictation, talking on Farsi, and then write in Persian. And after that, I use the machine translation to provide an English version of this story. That's I make it available. But basically, the story is about Kiki, our domestic robot. It's a very busy parent. It's the story about the busy parent who excited about purchasing the new domestic robot for taking care of their child Nina. And this domestic robot, Kiki, helped with housekeeping, cleaning, preparing the food, and not only for the entertainment of the child, but for the education as well. Can learn the child French, Spanish, Mandarin, and this child, Nina, was very busy with their pet. That was the two lovebirds, love the birds, and with robot. And the robot, in the same interest of the child, can read the books about the birds, and then can print lots of the photo for the kids. But more and more, this robot was involved in this family and learn more about the environment, adapt much better until the mother and father, they lose their control of child because all the time they spend the time together. And one day, Nina comes to the mother's home office, asked to play, and the mother refused because was busy with the work, and the child throw the toy to the head of mother, and the mom gets angry, says, "Oh, you're rude," etc. And after that, the behavior of the robot gets changed. It's become more conservative about the child, and it tells the parents it's a kind of a threat to the child. It wants to keep it more and more in the protection. And until, one day, the parents, they get a notice from the court. They should come to the court because of their malbehave against the child. And when they went to the court, they saw there's lawyers from the company of the robot factory, and they show the video of the filming of their house. It was very well edited about all their behavior, forced the child to brush their teeth, then force it to go to the bed, and then turn off the light. This kind of the thing, they show it in a movie, and it was such a catastrophe. And the judge, they said, you lose the custody of your child to the favor of the robot, and you should leave the house. And when they lost the custody and the robots, they were so upset about that until a day the robot, they take care of the child, but it was near the Thanksgiving. Then they ordered the ingredient and the food, but because of this Thanksgiving and because of it was the first time the robot stay at home, they didn't know the delay of the delivery for the food ingredient. Then the baby was hungry, and the first things that the robot has as an objective, it was a hungry baby and should feed it. Then they took the lovebirds, they prepared the grilled, and after that, it was the end of this domestic robot at their home. The parents, they get the custody, they get back to their house, and then they have their decision. They made their decision. They put the child and the robot in the car, they drove, and when the baby get to sleep, they take out the robot, they killed it, they destroyed all the GPS and tracking devices, and they passed the border and disappear in the Pacific Island because of the company. They didn't want to track them because the law, it was in favor of the robots, and it was the killing the robot, it was a big crime. Then this kind of the fiction, at some point we can think about what will be the future of the regulation, what will be the future of law. But basically, where are we heading as a human in this AI world? Is it time for everyone to be aware of that? Do we need the specific guidelines of the ethics of artificial intelligence, no matter if you are a user, if you are parents, if you are the developer of the technology? And basically, we want to know here, can AI really become as intelligent as human? I just Googled the definition of intelligence on Oxford Dictionary, and based on the Oxford Dictionary, it says the ability to learn, understand, and think in a logical way about things is a definition of intelligence, or the ability to do this well. If we just look at this definition of the intelligence, the machine can learn, can perform the task in a logical way, and therefore it can be intelligent. But more formally, we have a definition of the Turing Test. The Turing was an English mathematician in 1950 that defined a method to determine if a machine is an intelligent or not. Then now we know it as a Turing Test. And basically the Turing Test is we have a questionnaire that send a question to two rooms. In one room is a human, and in other room it's the robot, or it's a computer. Then the questioner asks a question, and then they receive the answer. Then the questioner doesn't know the answer comes from the computer or comes from the human. Then if in more than the 50% of the cases, the questioner can't distinguish the answer comes from human or comes from the computer, then this program, we say, pass the test, Turing Test. But now, when we look at this evaluation of AI system, most of the complex natural language processing can pass the Turing Test. The natural language processing, when we deal with the human language, like English, French, Spanish, not the artificial language like Java, Python, when we can talk in a natural language with machine, like machine translation, like Google Translate, automatic summarization, when we have a very, very long document and we want to have an abstract of this document, is automatic summarization. And in most of this case, the machine can pass the Turing Test easily. Then, but formally, when we do the evaluation of AI performances, we should consider two evaluation. The first evaluation is we call it intrinsic evaluation, which is we look at the stat component, and that component, we look at how the prediction of machine, or when the machine doing some task, it's what we want it. For example, if we do the stock market prediction, we develop an AI model, and for example, 15 years of a NASDAQ stock market, and we want to have, for example, a window of the 50 days of the past 50 days, and then the train model and the historical data, they read these 50 days and do the prediction of upcoming days. Then how we evaluate it, we say, oh, the price the machine predict, how is differ from the actual price that we will have. Then in this way, we can measure the performance and the precision of the accuracy of the prediction. But that is for a single module that we can do. But another type of the evaluation is that when we look at the performance of the AI system, considering the whole system. For example, in the example of the stock market, imagine we have a module for detecting the positive or sentiment of the investors or the feeling of the people from tweets. For example, we have a new iPhone is released, and they have the lots of information from the consumer, from the investor, from the global market on Twitter, and we want to see, is it a positive or negative? And then we look at this impact of from the news, from the social media, from the financial, technical indicator, and all of that together, that will help the system to make a better prediction. Then when we evaluate the whole module regarding the effect to the performance of the whole system, that is the extrinsic evaluation. Then in many cases that we are doing, we are focusing on the first type of the evaluation, the performance of the model, and quickly the companies, they want to deploy the AI without considering the impact of what will be the performance, the impact of this module working with the whole system. But now we have some metrics for AI performance. And when we look at some application of AI, the performance are good enough for specific requested task. But for many of the AI application, the execution are largely superior to the human, because AI has access to the big data. For example, has access to the 20 years of the historical data. Then they can find 1 million of the patterns using this big data. Or the power of the computing machine, we are not talking about the one single machine, 2 machines, 10 machines, or 100 machines. It's the huge clusters and the cloud computing that we have. The power of computing, it's a very important, that's how the speed of the processing are improved. And the algorithms are getting smarter and smarter every day by using this data, by using this power of the computing and processing. And also behind all of that, there are the teams of genius engineers that they are coding. Then it is hard to say, oh, is it AI is better or a single human being? Then and in addition, that's $1 billion of investment behind the AI systems. And as you can see here, that's why now lots of the application, AI application, they are largely superior to human. But how dangerous really is AI? Could we really be abused by AI? Could the family could have the impact on family life, in our community, in our society? You know, one of the reasons is we should be concerned is the poor specified goal of the AI system. The company, they are in rush because should answer to their investors. They want to make profit. They are in shortage of time. They deploy without really the testing, the algorithm, and their goal that they have is just for doing something short. For example, if you look at the Snapchat, it was, you know, a couple of years ago, it was just a disappearing chat, and that was so cool for everyone, especially for the teenagers. But after that, these poorly specified goals become the huge Snapchats, or it's become the Instagram. But you know how these short goal now can handle this large scale deployment. Then now we have this type of a technology rapidly deployed in the large scale environment with 1 million of the user and a huge volume of the data. Now the AI engine behind all that, it's what we call it is super intelligent. What the major developer of the AI company and the head of the AI corporation, they express their concerns about this super intelligent machine, because at some point we don't know how to control it, and we don't know, is it possible to stop it, or that will affect, like the atomic scientist catastrophic event. Then should we be concerned about that? Is it possible to just pause and stop, press a button, push a button to stop this AI? And also we want to know what is the responsibility toward this AI before we become surprised by our own creation. Lots of the problem that we have in AI, I'm not saying intentionally these problems are embedded in the algorithm, but unfortunately lots of the problem that we have, they are unconsciously embedded in the algorithm. Because, you know, for the people who are writing the algorithm, they are the young engineers, you know, 25, 26 years, they work in Silicon Valley, they develop some codes, and then, you know, some senior people, they check the codes and deploy for million and billion of the people across the globe. And there are lots of the unconscious bias that enter into the algorithms. For example, an example of that is the problem that we have with the hiring. Then if we develop an AI model to select the best candidate, because now there are in large scale, most of the company, the corporation, they don't have time to go over the single CV or resume sent to them. First it goes, it's read by a robot, and after that, if the candidate is in a good condition, good or bad, the bad candidate they will reject, the good candidate they will pass for the next level. But imagine that we have this model is trained on the historical data of the company, and in historical data of the company, we don't have the woman engineer comes from the Middle East or comes from India. Then what's happened? That is kind of the unconscious bias. We didn't have this information in the historical data, and the trained model by default, they reject all these candidate, the woman comes from this area of the Middle East or India. Then this kind of the unconscious bias and implicit bias that enter to the algorithm are very important. Then for today, we will talk more about the really why it's a necessity for legal and ethical guideline if we are the developers and we enter our knowledge to the algorithm. The developers, they are not aware of all the knowledge in the world. They know something, they have the specific goal, the short goal that we have, and we develop the algorithms. Then why that is this algorithm from the technology developers could be biased. Same time, from the industry perspective, the AI and the data that they're gathering, they can connect all together through the different application. And we want to know what are these legal and ethical guidelines for that. And for the government and for the consumer as well. Then the questions that we are concerned in the ethics, it's what are the moral obligations? For example, when the system, they do the prediction, it should be clear and not supposed to harm the individual. And what is the impact of this decision to the people? Or do companies make ethical choices or in a responsible manner? What are these guidelines? From the ethics of AI, we have the different categories, but you know, there are lots of talk about this ethics. There are some written guidelines, but in a very, very limited distribution, very limited example, very limited from the regulation. We have the fairness as the first topic in the ethics. The fairness, that means is a behavior of AI model without privileging or discriminating against the individual or the group. For example, based on their race, based on their gender, female, male, or a gay community. Then that is the example that I gave you for the pre-selection of the candidate. That was the example of the lack of fairness toward the comparing the men or women comes from that particular area. The next one is explainability AI. When we're developing the algorithm, we want it should be the explainable and transparent. That means when we look at the output of the system, we should be able to understand it. Why the system decide that? Especially that is a very hard question because of the most of the technique that we have, it's the deep learning. Deep learning, it's like a black box, and this black box, when we look at the deep learning, we have the different layer of the neurons, and these neurons in each layer, they process the information and pass it to the next neurons, and gradually they complete the information. And we have the back propagation. The information, they go back, they modify the information and pass it again to the next step. But we don't know at the end when there are some prediction or some decision by the system, what's happening between these neurons. It's like a black box for us. Then it's very hard to understand how the system predicted, and that is by analyzing the million patterns in the middle, the system decided. Then that is for example, the example of that, we can have the loan approval. When you enter your information for the credit card or for the loan approval, there are lots of the AI, they use this information to make a decision, should we approve the loan or not? But unfortunately, it's very hard to track and say, okay, why we can't give you the loan or accept you for the credit. There are some suggestions for monitoring the output result. For example, when we design the system, we make sure we are able to isolate the different part of the system, and we can see at each level what is the output of this system, and if there is a problem with the results of any part, we could be shut down that level. Then all of that is to have the goal to improve the explainability of the result. And also now there are a talk about the right to understanding, and more the companies and the consumer, they are talking about the right to understand because we want to know why machine made this decision, and if this decision it is not possible to explain or review, we can argue that and not accept it, or the company not deploy it inside their business. The next section is the bias in AI. Basically, the bias, it means we have an algorithm that learn from a data. After that, it make a decision as an outcome. But this outcome, we want to be fair. For example, we don't want to be in favor of a specific group and against the other groups. Is there any way that we can find this bias? Because there are lots of the unconscious and implicit bias inside of the algorithm, and lots of the research and development that we have inside of the company is for developing the smarter AI and the more powerful machine learning, but they don't invest on when the result is a problem. Then we have lots, the reason of this bias, it could be for the different reasons. For example, one of the reasons, it could be the unconscious bias, because we have the bias in our own decisions. For example, in the company that I gave you an example of the hiring company, human were biased. It preferred the, for example, man over woman, a candidate, and that created the historical data. Then this human decision and judgment transform to the behavior of machine. Or sometimes the developers or the human, we don't have enough knowledge about the subject, and this lack of the knowledge, that could be a blind part for artificial intelligence. Or sometimes the goal is unclear and the objective, it is not for the long term. But basically, when we look at the machine learning life cycle from the bird's eye, we have the user, we have data, and we have model. Then basically, user is the human factor. The human factor, when we do something, for example, imagine we have the recommendation system on Netflix. The Netflix, they look at our behavior, how much hours we spend on Netflix, which type of the movie we like, is it genre, is it drama, is it comedy, is it for family? But based on the user behavior, we generate some data. And also the human factor, when the algorithm, the developer, they develop this algorithm, they develop an algorithm based on their own knowledge. Then here we have the user, and the user, they will generate some data. Now, we have an AI model. We train it over this collected data from the users. Then whatever is generated in the data, the model, they will learn from this million of the patterns. And after that, model now is become intelligent and return the result to the user. For example, in the Netflix, now based on this trained model, now they suggest the movie, and now this suggestion, they change the behavior. If I receive all the time the movie that are in the specific topic, then I start to watch these topics, and my interest that will be registered to the system and generate more data in the way of the suggested movie from the model. Then, as you can see here, we have this cycle of interaction. But now, imagine we want to analyze the bias. If we just look at the human behavior, the human brain has a tendency to create a shortcut. Then we prefer something, and this prefers, it could have the unconscious bias. For example, if we are in the workplace and we want to see this example of the hiring AI system, in human behavior in workplace, we prefer certain names. Then if we look at the historical data, there are a report that said the candidate, they send their CV with the foreign sounding names. They have 28% less likely to be called for interview. Or if you have a white sounding name, it is more likely, 50% more likely to call back from interview comparing with the black sounding names. Then that is the human behavior in the workplace. Or the gender bias, another report, it's mentioned the male scientists, they placed more value by the male colleague than the female colleague. Or the similarity bias, the company or we prefer the people that are similar to us. You know, they have the same education, they went to the same university, they are from the same city. Then the similarity bias that we have. Then all these bias that we have in the human behavior that's generating the data that can affect the generating of the data that will be used by the model. Then blindly, now this data, without considering this bias, they will be used for training of the model. And after that, as you can imagine, the AI model, they are trained on this data, they have own bias, because human bias and the data bias, they are transformed to the AI bias. And now, for example, if you look at the bias in the decision system as a hiring, they are 20 companies, the big companies, from 1 million to 93 million per vendor. They are providing the AI-driven hiring tools. And many of them, they have this bias and the problem with this data. If we look at the other bias in the technology, the facial recognition are another bias. For example, the facial recognition potentially it could be used by police for detecting the crime. The face of we can have this face in the camera and can go to the database and match the face in the crime scene by the database. But the problem that we have is the detection of the facial recognition is very good when it's a white person, especially white male, but it has lots of the bias and the poor detection if the face is Asian and or African American, especially for the women, dark-skinned women. The error are up to 35%. And as you can see, if the police wants to use that, it's a huge problem that would create. And that was why a couple of months ago, San Francisco, Berkeley, and then many cities in US, they banned this technology used by police department. After that, FBI had an investigation and they found the serious bias in the facial recognition. And recently, with all the recent manifestation that we had in US, many companies, including Microsoft, Amazon, they refused to selling the facial recognition because of the bias to the police department. And also the bias in the recommendation system, like, you know, when we want to purchase some product in Amazon, or when we want to watch a movie on Netflix, to the system, they predict what is the user preference for the item or for the movie, what will be the higher ranking. But there are so many problems. For example, the popularity bias is one of the problems. The popularity bias is that when the items has a high rating, the system has a tendency to give this popular item and present it to everyone. For example, for a movie, if I'm not interested in that kind of the movie, the system doesn't consider my interest because it's look at the high-rated movie by everyone and they propose it to me. Then that is a problem of the popularity bias. And for this reason, there are so many interesting movie or interesting item, they could be underrepresentation because of this popularity bias. And also the problem of the unfairness, the system, they can discriminate some group of the people and not showing the appropriate information for them. Excuse me, may I have a question? How much time that we have?
You have 4 minutes, but you can, I don't know how many more slides left. But yeah, you keep going. I think Shabnam, she's gathering the questions for you. Okay, thank you. Then the other bias is for the emotion intelligence. The emotion intelligence is basically when the company, they gather information regarding their, for example, customer satisfaction from their voice, from their reviews. But if the system, they had the problem with interpreting this emotion, for sure there is some problem with the wrong decision making of the company toward the group. Or you know, I can go ahead with this bias, but fortunately, that's a good thing is the more companies are aware of the bias. For example, on Facebook, they try to ban more hate speech against the community, and there are some more and more the techniques that we want to provide avoiding the bias, like the real-time data, not only the historical data that we should look at, the live data
for giving more context to the system. For example, just for the emotion analysis, if you look at the smiles, is the 19 different type of a smile we could have, even in the painful situation or uncomfortable situation. Then we need more context for system. Then eliminating the unconscious bias, set the diversity inclusion goal, and learn about this the context and this unconscious bias. That would be a great help for that. The manipulation of behavior, if the robots and the AI can manipulate some users, the answer is yes. In the case of the, for example, deepfake, that is the main concern in on current election, because deepfake is the software that the people can manipulate it easily. They can put their voice and what they want to say to the face, or with the same voice of an important person, like the president or like the actors. Then that is a total fake message. It could be transferred. Or in the Facebook history, we had the problem with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. That was the 50 million Facebook user, their data that was leaked by the third party. And after that, it was, you know, that is how the AI can really abuse the user information. The human-robot interaction, the example that I gave you for the K robots of Kiki, for example, that's an example of the robot interaction with the human, how it's important to be studied. And the safety, AI safety is when we deploy the safety, we want to make sure it doesn't harm a human. For example, if we have the self-driving car, the main concern should be the safety of human. And the adversarial attack. Adversarial attack is a very interesting topic, and recently it's become more and more raised a concern. It's because like it's like an optical illusion. We have some data. For example, if you look at the first face, it's the face of a actress, famous actress. And the second image is exactly as like the first one. When we look at that, we don't see any difference, but there are some noises entered to this image to disrupt the result of the system. And the system, when it does the decision-making for categorization of the image, the result, that will be the third one. But we can't detect this noise. It's like a poisoning of image. There is a paper, interesting paper by these are the authors of this paper. They use this type of the glasses to impersonate the system. Then when they use this photo with the glasses, the system they detect the image in the bottom as the face recognition. Then in this way, the adversarial attack is poisoning the data, and it's not detectable by the bare eyes. And the last topic, it's the data privacy that I want to mention. The data privacy, that what should be aware of, that the data that's collecting from the individual or from the group, like the medical data, the healthcare data, and lots of these data are shared with the third party. But at which point this data could be shared? For example, in Europe, recently we have a regulation, it's called General Data Protection Regulation, and try to protect the data from the EU citizen. For example, if someone wants to opt data from the social media, they can do that. But in US, if you want to, for example, you can close your Facebook account, but all your information that will stay in the company. These are some regulations for the data protection in US. For example, HIPAA is for the health insurance data, or COPPA is for the children's online privacy protection, but we need much more regulation and guideline for using our data by the companies. As a summary of our today's talk, I wanted to mention some concerns that we have with the moral behavior of human toward artificial intelligence, from what we design, what we make, what we use, and what we treat as artificial intelligence system, and raise some concern about the behavior of the machine, especially when they are biased, or if they are very, very smart using the supercomputer and they become the super intelligent. The last point that I want to mention is when we have the artificial intelligence, there are few studies about the AI. We need much more scientific study. Even if we could have a scientific field to investigate the artificial intelligence, its influence on every single person, the individual life, their communities, their society, and on humanity. And I'm suggesting that for the short term and for the long term study, it could be a discipline like AIology. That's it for me. I know we have a very tight time. Thank you very much for your attention. I can take your question. If you are interested to read more about the ethics of AI, recently Katie Nugget published a question answering with me regarding the ethics of AI, and I encourage you to look at this question answering. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Great. Thank you, Anna John. It was very informative, and I just enjoyed in the back. Yeah. Thank you so much. I just want to encourage everyone, attendees, if they want to send your question, I have some questions here ready for you. But if you want to know, we can unmute you, and you can have a discussion, or ask your questions. So just raise your hand, and we can, our admins, they can unmute you and, turn on your video if you want. So I'm going to start. I know that there's a questions about, there's a question about do AI fairness bias issues that concern developers to revolve around mostly data sets, or the algorithm and models, or both of them? And how are the problems different for each?
I think I answered this question in my presentation, but just to go back, maybe it was so quick. When we talk about this behavior of the user, data, and model, then these three, when they working together, they can make the problem. For example, the problem of the unfairness and the hiring. As the human, we had some unfairness as a bias in our selecting the candidate, and after that, this was comes to the data, and the model that was developed, it was biased. But now, what we can do for that, first of all, we should be aware of this type of the bias. We can integrate some tests for the unfairness or for bias. For example, you can label some resume as what you wanted as a candidate. Example I gave you, for example, a young woman comes from the Middle East, or change the name from the white sounding to the other nationality, and then test if the system can get it or not. Then these are this kind of the bias we can enter to the system, and then see if the system can detect it or not. Then this kind of a test that we should do that, but everything that comes from the awareness. First, we should be aware of this bias and the fairness, and after that, we can do something about that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for explaining. We have the next question, Dr. Lisa. She's saying, thank you for your excellent presentation. what are your viewpoints about mind files? What do you think about Sophia granting personhood?
Actually, that was a big step toward the, you know, the for the people maybe they don't know Sophia. Sophia, it's the robot. It's a fully robot, and recently they received a citizenship from certain country, and there are all the right, the full right of the citizenship of a company or not. And when we are talking about the ethics, they are the group of the activists. They are fighting for the robot rights. Then that's another interesting discussion to follow. I think in my story about Kiki domestic robot, I mentioned that because in that fiction, when the parents they went to the court, and the court they had lots of regulation in favor of the robot because they think the robots they did their job perfectly, and who failed it was the parents. But you know, later for sure we have some rules and the right for robots, but as the human, we should be able to understand this right. Is it just a company for making money they provide this regulation, or it's for benefits of the humankind? That's a very important question to be considered from the beginning of these regulations.
Right, interesting. So I'm going to I have one question about, like the other side that, so right now, is there any organization, or are there any organization that currently like working on AI ethics, and are these efforts like centralized? I know that you mentioned about GDPR, but that's is like very general about privacy, data privacy. But is there anything about, specifically working on ethics in AI? Are there centralized anywhere?
It's a very, very good question, because there is a lack for that. For example, when I go to the conference, in many conferences that start to talking about the ethics, I'm talking about the conference for AI, or some speakers, the keynote speakers, they are talking about the ethics, but it is very hard to say who is working from that. For example, I heard from the Euronews, they said Facebook recently they created a board of the not the ethics but review of their algorithms from the especially from the European University, but they should start their work I think in 2021. But that's not really centralized, and that's the urgent need for that.
Okay, yep, great. So we still have time, like we go to more questions if you're okay. So the other question is, what can organizations do to better work on AI ethics into their AI-driven products?
Right. Yeah, I think the different section that I mentioned, these are the major sections that we should integrate to a guideline. And really, we should have a specific guideline at least considering these sections. Probably there are the other subsection or the other major section that could be complete these topics because by the developing rapidly the AI, the other topics that will add to that. For example, our team, they are working on the delivery of the package by drone. And for example, in New York City, you have the high rise, and you don't want all the package that comes in the lobby. Then you can have your specific address, and the drone, they will bring the package in your balcony. but they are raised lots of the question after that. Is the privacy, the photo from inside of your house, but by developing a technology, there are lots of the question that comes. But for now, for what we are aware, at least these sections, they are the things that we know. And it is not hard to give the seminars or be aware, give this awareness to the developers and make sure the company, when they are deploying the algorithms, they are not rushing on deploying the algorithm, and at least they have their own test of the ethics and make sure before the deployment these tests are passed.
Okay. Yeah, I think you answered the next question. What sort of training should be required, and how often? I think kind of like you covered that one. I think one last question that I'm interested in this question. What are your thoughts on developing EI, emotional intelligence, in AI?
I think the emotional intelligence, it's the part of is already in the pipeline, because now I don't know how you pay attention in your Siri, but now when I'm talking to my Siri, I see more and more human interaction to that. At USC, we have a group that they are working on like an avatar, how they can interact with the human, and integrated more and more emotion to that. It's not just a simple question answering, but a kind of the sympathy, a kind of the understanding of situation. Then the human will be more open to use the AI, or especially now in the pandemic, there are more people, they are isolated, and this kind of the emotional intelligence that could be really helpful for relieve the stress. And also in the example that I gave you, it was the emotional intelligence and the customer satisfaction, which is the very, very important. Now we have lots of the online retails. They want to learn more about the customer feedback, but the implicit customer feedback, we don't have that much. There are lots of the indirect behavior by the user that we can learn for the customer, and the company, the more and more they want to learn about this emotion. Not only the sentiment analysis, is it positive or negative, but what more about these their emotion toward when you watch a movie, or about consuming a product. And that is one of the really hot topic in AI.
Right. Yeah. That's right. Thank you. Thank you for explaining. I think that's it. Now we are going to stop questions, I think. Parisa.
Thank you so much, Anna Jan. That was perfect. That was a pretty mind-opening presentation. I had no idea about a bunch of the topics, especially that Kiki robot, that how dangerous it can be. That was pretty interesting. So I want to just tell everyone that we're gonna share the links that Anna shared with all the attendees in the follow-up emails. And I think that's it, right, Shabnam?
Yeah.
More questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
So much,
and yeah, thank you. Finally, we actually see you.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
You too. Yeah. Stay safe.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Good evening. Bye.